Hi friends, my name is host Eric. I'm the host of Talking with Famous People, and I've long claimed myself to be the world's greatest typologist, and probably one of the only ones who's as fully correct as one can be about it. And I've been prompted by many people on many occasions to sort of put up a master class on the subject. I've decided to do so, and most of these videos in this master class will be available for members only. I'm gonna turn on the membership thing, which I've been asked to, usually been prompted me to turn on for a long time. But anyway, I didn't feel like I had a good cause to do so until now. So I'm gonna make these videos. This is just an overview of what I'm doing, my process is, the organizational schemata of it, sort of. So if you look at defensible typology, it falls into two circles: practice and theory. We're going to go over the theory part of the circle today. The middle section there is sim mechanics. That is to say, when we start getting into how we would simulate it, namely, we define each directional flow of words in this direction to that field as extroverted intuition or whatever, that kind of stuff. That kind of, if you were to actually simulate it, it would be a way of experiment. You know, it was originally suggested by the person who prompted this name making, that it'd be theory and experiment, but experimental defensible typology and theoretical defensible typology. But I think practice is a better term here, and really the experimental part is that middle bit there, the part where the two circles overlap, simulation mechanics. So okay, now that we see that this is basically the overview of how we're going to taxonomy the unit being presented of curriculum, because I am a teacher, or was by trade for many years. So let's break down then the theory part. What's involved in the theory part? Well, broadly, you've got your framing section, your attention section on attention, fields and perspectives, relational mechanics of functions, and lastly, types, type descriptions, etc. So in the framing section, sort of the pre-work, setting up what it is we're doing, why it is we're doing it, why I'm doing my thing, and how each of us ought to frame things, blah, 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 blah. Well, to break down framing a little bit further, in the framing section, we're going to have a meta-framework thing, and this talks about Jung, historical progression of understanding people, this moment in time, various things that are larger issues that link to it. Learning framework describes how we're going to approach the matter linguistically, basically. What kind of how we're going to distinguish between different kinds of language when we're talking about cognitive functions, as well as when we're assessing cognitive functions. And then case framework. Now this is going to be mostly definitions of things like the prime directive, definitions of an attentional manner, definitions of a type, definitions of various things that are necessary as a prerequisite to even getting into the matter, right? Definition of what a field is, etc. Now, then we'll get into the actual parsing of attention a little bit. What is attention exactly? What are cognitive functions exactly? And why not some other approach to assessing or determining personality? Why not some other grouping approach, like horoscopes, or like your astrology sign, or phlegmatic and sanguine and those things? Then we go to fields and perspectives. We talk about the four fields upon which people pay attention: the internal metaphysical, internal physical, external metaphysical. Explain what those things are and why it works out that way. The three perspectives, namely observer, subject, object, and how these seven things, in conjunction with an individual's dominant nature, functionally create or define the slots, as we call them. Then, what about the relational mechanics? Well, in theory, the relational mechanics involve relations between knowing functions and interaction functions, and between action functions and deliberation functions. Of course, in practice, these things are often informed by value considerations, which we get into a little bit later here. So if we look at the types section, this is where we're going to go through each of the 16 types, give some kind of type description that's mechanical first, and then have a type description that talks about likely behavioral correlates or affect linkages, but note that they're not definitive, right? We'll talk about groupings, different ways to group types, such as the quadra, or my way of grouping them with meta-analysts, analysts, executives, and executors, and what those different groupings tell us about shared values or shared whatever. We'll talk about intertype relations, the extent to which people are kind of constitutionally well suited to be engaged with one another, and in which context, and which kind of relations are constitutionally doomed to fail in predictable ways. And of course, we'll talk about values, the absolute values and instrumental values, and how the different types and the different approaches to these cause a lot of the clash that comprises the conflict among people in general. Plus, we'll talk about misuse of typology, how not to use it, and that it's supposed to be a solution to pathologization, not a new means of pathologization. And that brings us back to this first. So that's an overview of how I'm going to break down the theory section and how many classes exactly this will be. I would suspect that probably each one of these subsections of a subsection here, like, so this gets a class, that gets a class, that gets a class, but some of them are a little bit longer, like what is attention, what are cognitive functions, why not something else. This is one big conceptual block of arguments, and it may break into 3 classes, may break into 2, may break into 4, I'm not sure. We'll have to see how that plays out. I have to do the next level of outlining, basically. So with this 4 fields thing, it's hard to talk about in isolation from the 3 perspectives meaningfully, and it's hard to talk about in isolation from how those create slots. But probably because these are YouTube videos and they can be relatively short, I'll probably err on the side of shorter classes covering less material. And so I may do a class for each of those. Knowing functions, interaction functions. I may do a class for each of these functions independently, and then do another class for how they engage relationally. Because ultimately, when we're talking about cognitive functions, we need to go back and forth between talking about them as objects of analysis of actualities of cognitive functions, which always originate with an individual paying attention, and of the interaction between ways of paying attention to each other that we can reliably grab hold of and test in meaningfully, empirically sustainable ways. And then, for this will probably take multiple classes to get through all of this stuff, because I could certainly do a video just on each of the 16 types, covering how what we learned theretofore theory-wise tells us about what we can know about a given person if we know their type. The groupings one is a shorter class, but because it can tell us, it can inform us, but not really tell us anything. It informs us meaningfully about how different types share common frames of reference, but it doesn't really tell us about. It doesn't give us any actionable intelligence, so to speak. And I do a class on intertype. I could probably do multiple classes on intertype. I could do a class on each of the intertype relations. I do think they play out differently for perceivers than for judgers, and I'm using it literally in the sense of judgers being anyone with a judging function up top. That's say deliberation or an interface function. So anyway, as to how many exactly classes this breaks into, that's going to be determined more as I outline the next level of stuff, and I'll do it one thing at a time. I'll start with the meta framework and work my way down. So you can anticipate some of those videos starting to occur, trickle in here and there as I make my way through the Defensible Typology Master Class. The second section, practice, will be all about how to apply, like what kind of questions produce what kind of answers, and what kind of answers are revelatory of what kind of things. So it'll be all practical. And I'll probably in the practice section have a lot of clips of people giving answers as part of those videos. I may have some in the theory section as well, but I hope to put together some good high quality videos of the sort that are driven by me doing my job as I've always been able to do it well, as a debate coach, as a director of a school, as a classroom teacher. Curriculum generation and implementation was always a strong suit of mine. So I hereby promise you that you won't be disappointed by the thoroughness and intellectual rigor of the Defensible Typology class, and also that you're not going to get drowned in a bunch of TI nodes that aren't particularly relevant. I'm attending to what's salient to understanding the thing, and I'm a good teacher. So thanks for watching, and don't forget to eat plenty of cheese. That's it.
That's such a good video.
Thanks, darling.